All right, and so let's look at the big picture. I made this notebook a few years ago when I was making my own quantum memoirs. So there's like a lot of sacred geometry studies in here, where I was studying the spin and the movement. And so what I'm trying to do with this illustration is I'm trying to show that on these 13 spheres right here, that I made them so that they're more dimensional looking. They're actual, like my oranges. They're round, they're spheres. And so there's 13 of them on there. If I was to make this flat image, these 13 spheres laying here, if I was to make this like more dimensional, there would be 6 more spheres on top of these 13. 3 of them would nestle right here in this space here, and then the other 3 would be extensions out from that. And I sort of have that illustrated here. So you have the green ones, which is the fruit of life, and then you can see the orange ones. These 3 orange ones would sit on top of the green ones, like I will do here. They'll be sitting on top of the blue ones, and then there would be an additional sphere coming out from those 3 that would make those 3 rays that would then extend to the other side of the page where you see I have the dashes. There would be 3 there with 3 more extended out. So there's 6 on top and there's 6 behind. And then there's these 12 that are here in the center. And this is the flat plane that I use for the quantum memoir. So what I want to do is I want to translate this drawing to here. And then when I do that, when I bring those 3 that are standing out, you'll start to see more of the vector equilibrium, this shape or pattern that Buckminster talks about and uses in his work, or used. I guess all space and time exists always, right? So he's still using it, perhaps through me. Anyways, so there's these 3 spheres, and then you start to see this vector equilibrium that I have drawn here. And then those 3 spheres would be inside of that vector equilibrium, I believe. And so that's where I'm always redrawing these things and finding new people to talk about it and share, because I haven't really found, other than Stroopy, somebody to like have conversations with, like how these things fit together and play together and how they spin. So if you're somebody that's interested in that, then leave some comments, because this was the post that I made earlier about that 369. So if you have 369, is that 369, is that in this plane? Or is it in the spheres that are on either side? Because when you have these 3 spheres on top, and then you have the under 3 spheres, they're actually offset from one another a little bit, which creates like a torque or a spin. I think Bucky, he would refer to it as turbining. So let's see, let's go back to that other illustration where I had the 3 spheres there. So somehow this triangle and then the triangle of the ones underneath will just be slightly offset from one another. So it'll kind of make like a top. I don't know. I guess the spin, let's see if I have it wrote down here anywhere. I wrote turbining. That's kind of what I think Bucky referred to it as. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here. It's like basically a duality. There's 2 different forces that are at play, gravity and radiation, or something, you know, being convergent or divergent. So in essence, us. So what I first have to figure out, I've done this on Procreate, use the digital device. I got to figure out where does it line up, you know, on top of here. I think it's something like this, but let's see. Okay, so let's look how it's shaping up. I believe that in the 3rd dimensional pattern of this fruit of life, or Metatron or Merkaba, these 3 spheres would be sitting on top of this flat plane of spheres, these 13 blue ones. These 3 ones would be sitting here kind of nestled like this. And you can see that it's a bit off center from the center sphere. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bottom three, the three spheres that go underneath the blue ones, if I was to make like a third dimensional illustration of this. So I'm going to add my three yellow spheres. I'm going to use yellow pencils to indicate those are further back. They're behind the blue one. And so then we start to see that that triangle, this little triangle right here, will start to line up in a different place. And I think that that's where I was getting the idea of spin or torque or turbining. And I'd love to see if anybody else sees that and if they want to chat about it in any way. So this is what I'm going for. And there it is. So now let's take a peek at what I've been exploring for the last few years. I have my 13 blue spheres. That's the fruit of life pattern that the Quantum Memoir uses to fill in with thoughts and feelings. And then I have these 3 orange spheres on top of the blue ones and then 3 yellow ones behind the blue ones. So we're seeing this depth. And then if I just take these 3 yellow and the 3 orange, that's 6 spheres. They're around this center blue one, which would be 7. Now, if I add the other blue spheres that would be touching the center one, that's 6 more. So in this sense, what I have here with these 6 blue spheres, the inner blue spheres, the center blue sphere, and then the orange and yellow, we have 12 spheres around 1. That's Bucky's thing, right? So this is, to me, the nucleus. This is the nut, the shell that I'm cracking in my alchemy, right? These 12 spheres around 1, but I use the flat plane of these 12 around 1 to write in. So here's where I find something interesting that I wanted to point out. So you see here that I have this little tiny hole between these 3 orange spheres, and it's just a little off center from the 3 yellow ones that are behind the blue. And so that to me is when this thing spins or wobbles or does the jitterbug or whatever, whoever wants to call it, that's happening because of this offset of how these rays move through the vectors or the empty spaces, I suppose. However, this is just imagination comparing, physical reality with thought as an analogy. So what I'm seeing is that if I draw a circle around these yellow and orange ones, and what it's going to do is it's going to intersect my 6 blue spheres. It's going to cut them off, like right there at the midpoints. But I think that must be the creation cycle, or not cycle, the creation pattern, or the seed of life pattern, some of those other sacred geometry patterns that people work with. I don't know. I might just go ahead and draw a circle around that, because I think that might actually be like the nucleus of it all, the nut. So the idea is that this is a toroidal field. This is my body. This is the planet that I live on, the universe that I exist in, the solar system, all of it. Micro and macro right there. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to make the vector equilibrium stand out so that it looks dimensional, so that you can then see that it's kind of like the shell, even though Bucky does not believe that there's a surface. It's kind of like the skin or the outer edge of this field that I'm drawing. So I'm going to do that next. See if there's anything else in this book to look at. Okay, so now you can kind of see the inness and the outness of, not only just the sacred geometry stuff, but maybe the quantum memoir that I work within, these 13 blue spheres. So like the blue spheres are basically, in my mind, kind of like on a flat plane, and I can either have that plane this way or I could have it vertically. And so I work with it in both ways, depending on if I'm just doing a thought form or if I kind of like mentally stand it up in my mind like this, if I'm doing the revolution of time cycles, like the Earth cycle, lunar cycle, and solar cycle. But if I'm doing my Know Thyself page or some of the other thought forms, then I'm having this blue plane of spheres just kind of laying down. And in my imagination, they are what I see, but everything else still exists. The flower of life still exists, interconnecting all of these blue spheres. The orange and yellow spheres, they're the rays, the spheres that radiate out and back. And so this is where you get that spin of both, you know, clockwise and counterclockwise. Both of those things are happening. There's an inside and an outside, a front and a back, an up and a down. All of that, those positions, all of those points of view exist in this shape to me. And hopefully you can kind of see that, because now you see these inner spheres, the 7 blue inner spheres, the orange and the yellow ones, they're sort of contained within the green vector equilibrium pattern. They're inside of that, you know, and then even inside that, there's like a tighter formation of them where they make like a nucleus or a nut or a shell, you know, and then so there would be like a veil around that. But then I have the vector equilibrium, kind of all of these lines would connect, and you could start to see the Merkaba or Metatron's cube. So those are the active male lines that pull all of these yin spheres together in my quantum memoir practice. And so what still intrigues me and kind of eludes me, but I know it's something that I'll be able to talk to people about in the future, is how these 3 spheres on top and behind are just a bit off center from each other, and how that affects like the spin or the movement of, you know, this geometry. So if that intrigues you, join me. Let's play together.